Hey, friends and neighbors, welcome to the studio class of Low Brass U. I forgot to think of something that rhymes with the letter U, so all I can offer you is peace and prosperity and honor to you and your household. There you have it. I am your fearless co-host, Connor, and with us today, our fearless leader is Zach.
Hello, everyone. How's it going? Hopefully you can hear me. The audio situation is new, so if you can't hear us or something, please, scream bloody murder and make sure that everything is okay. But yes, we should have a good class today. Are we calling it a class? I guess that's what it is.
You can call it a class.
It feels weird to say it at that moment, but I guess it is a class. So today we got a few topics that we're going to kind of go over, and as per usual, feel free to ask some questions, and if you have anything pressing on your mind, I think this is a good venue for that. So I'm going to crank this just a little bit higher. Let's see. How about there? Seems good. And then, Connor, you want to maybe just say a few words so I can check the levels on that?
Hello, testing, hello.
Yeah, we'll see if that's good. It may not be good.
Okay.
Again, feel free, anyone, to jump in and give us audio feedback. It is hard to do this whole thing. I also forgot to kick it back so that you can be seen. Sorry about that.
Oh, did I move?
Yeah. Or maybe do I have this automatically doing things? I thought I turned that off.
I don't know.
It is not off. Now it's off. Can hear both well. That's good. That's
great.
Ideally what we're shooting for. Maybe even is a little bit too hot, but hopefully it's all right. But cool. So today we're going to kind of try to workshop a couple of ideas for how we can kind of structure this show a little bit better, this class. And I was teaching some lessons today. That's a lie. I only taught one lesson today. It wasn't some. It was exactly one. Which I worked on that Bordoni that I've just played. But we also talked a lot about the Overtone Series. So I thought that might be something that we could talk about a little bit. What do you know about the Overtone Series, Connor?
Whole lot of notes. For our notes per button ratio on a brass instrument is better than probably any other instrument family out there. Except for maybe, of course, the human voice, which has no buttons really to press. But it's a fascinating thing, and it's kind of hard to explain. It's pretty easy to show, but something that once you understand the Overtone Series and where it is on your horn and how it works, it just opens up all types of pathways for learning how to navigate your horn and be more musical. which is why we're here at the studio class.
So let's see if we can do a little visual demonstration here. Cool. I think I just have it sent where everybody else can hear the piano sound, but the two of us know the real synth sounds that are going on. So
they can only hear the piano feed?
Yes.
I see.
I can make it where they can hear everything else now.
I like the cool stuff. Yeah. That's what we want. All right, Mr. Luscious Chords.
Yes.
So why do we have a grand staff in front of us, and what are you going to put on it?
So I think we're going to learn about the Overtone series. So if you don't know about the Overtone series, you're going to learn today, and you're going to be a master of the Overtone series by the time that we are done here. Which I think this kind of parlays into the idea of, I think we should address one specific theory topic a day.
Okay.
A class. So today it'll be the Overtone series, which is important for all musicians, but is more so important for us brass players, I think. But it's relevant for everybody. So do you know who discovered the Overtone series, Connor?
I don't.
Do you know a lot about mathematicians?
You know, you're really asking the wrong guy if you're asking me about mathematicians. I thought you knew me better.
If I were to say a squared plus b squared, what would you say that equals?
Oh, Pythagoras discovered the Overtone series?
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yes, because he was also a musician, so he was kind of the first person to kind of know what was going on. My mic might be a little hot. Oh, no. Hopefully it's better now.
Actually, it might just be because I've been holding my breath this whole time.
Yeah, maybe I should just stop breathing. I'm just kidding. No, so hopefully that's better. I still need to work on. I did have compression set up before, but I've got a whole new setup, and I guess I don't have compression or limiting or anything quite set up. So hopefully it's not so bad. Hopefully it's not totally distracting, and I'll try to not breathe. So we'll talk a little bit about the Overtone series. In that, I think we'll definitely do it in B flat. The question is, should we do it? What octave should we do it? Should we do it for trombone? That's probably the best one to do it for.
If we're gonna first demonstrate it on, or I would say notate it in the instrument that you wish to demonstrate it on first, so that we're having like a pitch for pitch relationship.
How about this? You will be our demonstrator.
Fair enough.
I'll show it on screen. But you will be the demonstration vehicle for this.
All right. So that limits us to things with tenor trombone length tubing.
Right, which I think tenor, the thing about tenor trombone, every time I teach brass methods, I like using a straight tenor to demonstrate how brass instruments work because it's kind of the simplest. Other than like a bugle, but without moving the slide, kind of is just a bugle.
Right, and we're not going to be moving the slide for the Overtone series by definition because we're just playing notes in the same position. So we're really just showing you, with any given length of pipe, how many notes you can play with that given length.
Right. So when we're talking about this Overtone series, this exists for, pretty much all instruments that this is somewhat relevant for. But for how brass instruments work, we're talking about this is all of our first position notes, all of our open notes, and then it'll be for all the other fingering combinations or slide positions as well, but we're going to start with just doing it in first position. So these will be the same sequence for any brass instrument. The octave or potentially the key may be different. So we're going to talk about it for B-flat trombone or B-flat euphonium, which, we talk about, we say B-flat not because it's a transposing instrument, but because of the Overtone series, that's where this comes from. So if we were talking about B-flat trumpet, this would be the same thing, but down an octave as far as what concert pitch notes come out, but not the written notes that they see. And then again, tuba will be an octave down from this, again, assuming a B-flat tuba. So what's our first overtone, Mr. Connor?
If we're talking about the first overtone, is it correct to be calling it an overtone, or would it just be calling it the fundamental pitch? Is it still an overtone?
Let's call it the fundamental pitch.
All right, so the fundamental pitch, this is Grandpa Shark of the notes. This is the one that lives at the very, very bottom. It's the lowest note that you can theoretically play on any button combination or any position. So for us, standard length tubing tenor trombone, your pedal B flat is the last real note, or the first real note you can play, I guess.
Right. So looking at
There
that
you go.
grand staff, that I'll put it on my
Push
forehead.
that in a little bit.
Can we see that on my forehead? I don't know
Yes,
if
we
it's
can
more
see that on your
helpful there. Maybe it's more helpful with me not in the way. Hopefully, even our mobile viewers can see that. I am curious, if anybody's on a cell phone and this is horribly hard to read, let me know. Or if you're on a computer and it's way too big, I don't know. Let us know. I'm kind of still workshopping the graphics a little bit. So that's our fundamental of the instrument. So is that pedal B flat? What's our next one?
Next one is up an octave. So the only notes in between pedal B flat and regular B flat, if you want to call it that, there's nothing. So you go straight between those two. Nothing in there. I can false tone some things and kind of fake it. But those notes, they don't slot. They're not real life. That's just me bending down the B flat to grab more notes in between B flat and pedal B flat.
And definitely for the sake of this argument, false tones do not exist.
Right. We're not talking about those. Those are man-made, manufactured notes that don't exist in nature.
There you go.
That's how we'll call it.
All right. So we got B flat and B flat. And I think we probably mostly knew that. Maybe the one that's kind of elusive sometimes is knowing about that pedal.
Right. They're not all the time is that readily discussed.
Right.
It's definitely not going to be in your Essential Elements book, even though it is technically like the first note of the harmonic series.
Right. But it's maybe a little bit harder to play and maybe not as helpful starting out.
Right.
Not that it's not a good note, but
you'll get there.
Right.
But it's not going to sound that great.
So what's our next one?
Next note is going to be an F natural. Yeah. Otherwise known as the third partial F. Third partial meaning we're at note number 3. So you can think of these. Sometimes the Overtone series is called a couple of different things, and it's probably important to say. You're going to hear people explain it as the harmonic series or as the partial series. They're all generally speaking of the same thing.
Yeah, there are some slight differences, and I will admit, I hate to put incorrect information. Sometimes I refer to them incorrectly. There are slight differences in them. For right now, we're not going to worry about those differences.
Right. For all intents and purposes, if you hear any of those sort of things, they're generally talking about this phenomenon. It could,
right.
You can equate it to the Overtone series.
So we got B flat, F. What's number 4?
Number 4 is another B flat.
There we go.
So there we go.
So I think what's a helpful thing to talk about now that we have 4 notes is the sequence of these. So if we just looked at these as a mathematical sequence being 1, 2, 3, 4, if we take out the F, 1, 2, 4 for our B flat octaves.
Mm-hmm.
If we were just looking at a mathematical sequence, what might be the next number in 1, 2, 4,
8.
8.
All right.
I don't know how I got all those with I barely can get all those with 2 hands.
So all your B flats are occurring in powers of 2.
Yep. And that'll always be the case. The next one is 16. The next one's 32. We don't really go up that high. I would say that 16 is kind of complete. We don't really need to talk about.
You're getting into like the comedy section of the trombone range at that point.
Right. So we've got 1, 2, 4, 8, 16.
Right.
We don't really need to talk about that note.
We don't need that one. You're not going to hear it tonight from me. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, and that's okay. It's not a real... I mean, it is a real note in that it exists, but it's not a real note in that it's a required note of a typical trombone range.
Okay. So we got the powers of 2 figured out. Let's go step by step a little farther. So we had just gotten up to high B flat. Adding the pedal. Those are my 4 notes. The 5th note, what's the 5th one, Zach?
D. And I'm so sorry that I can't force this note to be in bass clef.
That's okay.
One day we'll get there, but this is the D right above the 1 ledger line. But it shows up in treble clef here, and I'm so sorry.
Right. I think it's important to note that ledger line is just kind of like signifying it's middle C, and so that one, of course, isn't really in a treble or bass clef, but it's showing how we're going into the actual treble clef. And I didn't really understand that. Like the very first times that I played a D on my trombone in like 6th or 7th grade band, I wasn't making the connection of like, oh, that's in the treble clef. And I don't know when it was that I made that connection. It was probably sometime in high school because, I sat around and played with my thumbs a lot during my piano lessons. So I probably should have been learning the treble clef staff.
Yeah, I mean,
but I think it's cool.
It wouldn't hurt, but yeah, it's definitely one of those things that it's helpful to kind of have a little bit more complete knowledge of some theory things. And as a trombonist, it's not crazy to eventually have to see some things in treble clef.
I think absolutely.
There are a few scenarios that can happen. One, you might have to read somebody else's part. That's something that can happen. You could be playing at a church and reading out of a hymnal and be asked to cover the alto line. That could be something that could happen. Or you could be playing a jazz gig and have to read a transposing treble clef, like B flat treble for trumpet or tenor saxophone, or E flat treble for alto or bari. Those sorts of things can happen. And even in some trombone literature, you occasionally see concert pitch treble.
Oh, yeah. I've had it recently. I was reading it in a musical. There was just straight up concert pitch treble, and they were like, play the note. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and we can talk about how maybe we don't do that as from an arranging standpoint, scoring and arranging.
Right.
Especially I'm teaching that course right now, scoring and arranging, and yeah, we don't write trombone and treble clef.
Right.
You will get points deducted for writing trombone and treble clef. It could exist. It does exist in the real world, but I would argue that we probably shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
So let's go back. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 6.
Sorry, F again. Okay, so that's our 6th one.
Right. So what's also important to kind of realize from that mathematical sequence, 1, 2, 3 was our first F, 4, 5, 6 our second F.
Okay.
And doubling that will get our next one, 12, 24, 48.
There you go.
So we're always going to be multiplying by 2. So you said powers of 2 when we were talking about octaves, which is not incorrect as a mathematical sequence for that. But I think it's maybe slightly more helpful to think about it as it doubles each time.
Right. It's doubling every time.
So 1, 2, 4, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So those 2 Fs are 3 and 6. And then this next one, I think, is where we get kind of...
Yes, this is one where the most chips start happening in like early brass playing, because you're like, what? Like, I played the next note.
Right.
And so far, every single note that we've played, it's important to notice it's been B flats, Fs, and a D natural, all of which belong to the B flat major triad. And so we've had like a certain tonality kind of in our head this entire time, and a wrench is about to get thrown into that. Yeah, and it's a scary note. So this is A flat, but listen to what it sounds like on the trombone.
Yes, this is where it'll get more different than the piano.
Should I play it by myself and then we play together just to hear the difference?
Why don't you land on it and I will join you?
All right, join me.
Yeah, and we won't make everybody suffer through that for too long.
Beautiful, right?
But we
just like Ma used to make.
Yeah, but we all can kind of hear that it's pretty out of tune.
It's incredibly low, and if you really believe in your heart that there is an A flat there that's in tune, I've heard trombone players that can lip it up, but it's definitely an intentional lipping up.
And I think it's also, each horn is a little bit different with those sorts of intonation tendencies.
Right. This one just gives me a real, it dips it. It does exactly what the harmonic series is like physically supposed to do. And I like that about this horn because it makes it a very consistent horn, but then it's like I can't get away with like certain sneaky things like that unless I'm being particularly clever that day, which most days I am not.
Yeah, I would say in general that's a no-no.
It's a no-no.
I'm not saying it can't ever work, but I definitely would
Right.
argue that it's probably not going to work under most kind of standard situations.
Right.
Maybe if you're playing in the key of E,
Sure.
You know, you want to play that note, and I'll play an E. I'll play E's and B's.
Yeah, just E's and B's. Let's see what that sounds like. It's still a little low. And I was trying to lift it up. I was gonna try to give it to you. I was like, all right, maybe we're onto something. But I think what Zach's trying to say, what we haven't said out loud yet, is that in just intonation, the third is going to be lowered slightly, and in that same
third,
way,
just for
the major third, and a flat 7 in a dominant chord is going to be low in a harmonic series at least, and so we were thinking maybe those two lows might link up, but I think this flat 7's a little bit lower than what a third needs to be.
Right.
So there you have it.
I'm actually going to do one thing. We're going to pull this up on the keyboard. We're going to be back.
Okay.
So now.
Hello, everyone. Oh, now we got a piano.
Yeah, I was just thinking this
Look
would
at
be
us.
easier.
That's very helpful.
So as we already kind of talked about, that B flat is number 8.
Right. Yep.
So that's kind of our mathematical sequence there. And all of those do have, we talked about that A flat being really flat, but all of them do have slight tendencies.
Right, yeah. We're kind of picking on A flat, but none of them are perfect, and it's just the physics of how sound wiggles.
Right. A flat is the most wrong, at least that we've gotten to so far.
You can pretty much get away with a lot of music playing and not notice the other tendencies, and you're going to notice an A flat that's that low.
Right. What's our next worst intonation one out of those compared to equal temperament? If you're keeping score at home, if you know what those words mean, we'll talk about those another time. Probably.
Like the one that's the most out of tune out of those,
other than the A flat.
Other than the A flat, would the third be lowered more, or is the fifth raised more?
The third's lowered more, so that's the furthest
that's
away from kind of what we'd expect to hear,
like home bass
on equal temperament, or even a piano or something like that. Is that D being your D is probably a little bit low, but we kind of all work on pushing that note up just a little bit in first position. Most of us can kind of get it close with enough practice, but there are keys where it's less practical.
I always wonder if, and I psych myself out with this a lot. We're talking about like the trombone it's vibrating in the way that physics tells us to. That's why it has an overtone series. And because of that, it is technically in, just intonation, where everything that nature dictates should be lowered is lowered. Everything that's high is high, and that's all based around and oriented to, theoretically, if you put B flat, the fundamental, right on the money, everything else should fall in place. And you're fighting things like pianos and guitars and things like, well, guitars, it's a little more complicated, but pianos and keyboards and synthesizers,
different ways.
They're all, that are in, equal temperament, tuning. So all the notes are exactly spaced apart, which is, that's going to get you the most bang for your buck, because you're not going to have keys that are out of tune, when you go to play. And but yeah, the trombone, it naturally fights that. And I always wonder if I have trained myself to fix those problems, or if I have trained myself to hear the trombone as being correct.
I think that's a really important thing to talk about. And coming more from the valve side of the street, I definitely think I see more of the train myself to accept that that's okay.
Yes.
Like trombone, I think, obviously our first position, we can't go in any further, but everything else we can adjust. And I think in general on trombone, everyone's a little bit more paranoid about exact placement, because it's like, you just don't want to feel wrong. Right. You're like always afraid. It's like, is that exactly where my fifth position G flat is? Like we're always a little bit thinking about it. Whereas I feel like more on valve instruments, just like, well, Essential Element said this is this note, and it's like we're good to go. It's because it's in the back of the book. It's in an appendix somewhere.
The guy at the factory already cut the length of tubing in the valve, so it's spoken for.
Because I kind of find that specifically thinking about certain tuba excerpts is kind of where my mind goes. Like the perfect example is hearing Meistersinger on C tuba, which is what most of us play it on in the United States, maybe not all, but a lot of us are playing it on C tuba. And I don't know how well you know your tuba excerpts, Connor. It's okay if you don't.
I don't know.
But do you know the highest note in that excerpt?
I sure don't.
So it's the E above middle C.
Wow.
So do you know what that partial wise would be on C tuba?
On a C tuba, that would be, that'd be the 9th partial, or no, 10th partial.
10th partial, which shares the same intonation tendencies as the 5th partial, in that it's going to be flat most likely. And then it's I would say it's, especially on C tuba for most of us, whether it should be or not, it feels like it's in the extreme high range, which most of us tend to get flat up there. So it's a flat partial, and we're flat. 2 wrongs do not make a right. And so you often kind of hear that excerpt being played, and that E is very low. And I always kind of like, whenever I hear it in like a master class or something, whenever I hear that excerpt being played and that E is really low, I always kind of do a little test, and I just like look around the room to see if anybody else seems bothered. And I just feel in general, everyone's just like, sounds great. You got the high note out. I'm not even concerned that it's flat.
Right, we're not mad.
I don't think that we hear it because we're so used to that note in our own practice being wrong, in our students' practice being wrong. I think we just get kind of comfortable with that. So I think you are right that we get used to these sorts of concerns.
The one that I hear the most in my own playing, like whenever I record myself on my phone, like a lot, like I try to do it every day. And the one that I listen to all the time that I catch myself is G natural, second position Gs. I throw them right where like normal second position is. And for anyone who plays trombone who knows about like the upper register, let me get in the screen a little bit. That second position G doesn't actually live in second position. It's really like it's a sharp second or a lowered one, whatever you want to call it, but it's not pretty. Yeah, let me throw this right at perfect second position. Let's do it. I like this.
Yeah, you go in first, and I'll play it after you.
All right. Yeah, boy, it's low.
Right. So I think what that kind of is a good demonstration of the use case of that partial number 7, that A flat partial.
Right. It's like, while we don't have an A flat necessarily at our disposal,
on the trombone, you can use anything lower than that off of that partial.
Still in play.
So you could
Absolutely.
play a G, F sharp, F, go so on and so forth. We don't usually go past that point.
Right.
But what do you do on a valve instrument?
On a valve instrument, wouldn't you defer to an alternate fingering that is like of like a lower partial and just go up the octave? So like when I think of a high G on like euphonium or valve trombone, 1 and 2 is what I would.
Yeah, I think there's maybe a slightly clearer way of explaining that.
I guess
in that instead of playing it off of the 7th partial,
you're on the 8th
you're on the
partial.
8th partial.
Which is more in tune.
Right. So you could demonstrate that on trombone by maybe starting on B flat in first, glissing down to G in 4th, and then maybe show us A flat A flat in first to in tune G in sharp 2. Can you play both of those things?
Sure thing. So there's our 4th position G.
So same note, but being played off of a different partial.
Right. Really, as far as like timbre and quality and like resonance, when they're in isolation like that, they're pretty indistinguishable.
Right.
And like the reason why trombone is so readily capitalized on that, lowered first, sharp second thing is because it just makes moving around the horn easier. When you're going from F to G using that new tricky shortcut, it's not even a full slide position away. It's like 3/4 of one away. As opposed to going all the way out to 4th, where I've got a bunch of junk in between. I have that 7th partial that I have the chance of hitting and warbling. So there's that extra little like no man's land exactly. I was working on those advanced flexibility studies for the jazz trombone, the Greg Waits book, in a lesson yesterday, or not yesterday. Was it an hour ago?
A little different, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that it's important to talk about these, for valved instruments and for slide instruments, and that we have access to the same things.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that you're playing a tuning slide and I am not, like if I were to play that on euphonium, if I can do that. Did I turn off the room mics? I did turn off the room mics. I'm going to do...
And they were room mics.
So you should be able to hear that, it's technically an option, but since I don't play a tuning slide and I don't have a main tuning slide trigger, although that probably wouldn't help us for that note, there's not really much I can do to get that in tune. I mean, I can lip it to some extent.
Right.
But it's not super usable. And I think that that's kind of one of those things. Sometimes it can work. And at the end of the day, we have these rules. These are the fingerings. These are the slide positions. If it works and it sounds good, I'm of the mindset that it's okay to use. But probably for a lot of us on a valved instrument, those aren't usable. The seventh partial is just completely just a loss.
Right.
Maybe in a trill situation, maybe in, 20th, 21st century music where we're having to play quarter tones, maybe it has some uses there. But overall, in our kind of traditional Western music approach, that's probably not going to be super helpful.
Right.
So that's just up to the eighth partial. Technically, it's infinite, right?
Let's go.
Let's do at least a couple more. Because I think the next...
It gets really interesting harmonically here in a second.
And I think the next one is... one that I feel like I just feel like with my students, they don't learn until college. Like nobody tells them they've played that note, but they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what's going on there. So especially if you're just joining us, we're talking about the Overtone Series on trombone, and we can apply this to any brass instrument. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What's lucky number 9?
It's a ninth scale degree, which kind of works out. It's kind of cool.
So we have that C. So that's we can play that in first position. We can play that open, and I think for most applications, I find that to be the best place to play that note. What are your thoughts?
I love a first position C. I don't like it anywhere else.
What about when you're playing euphonium or valve trombone?
Oh, now that's a little bit different, I guess. Even then, there's not a whole lot of other positions that I can rely on to be solidly in tune.
Right. So,
or I shouldn't say positions, valve combinations.
Yeah, I mean, so that would be a note that we could play first valve.
Yeah.
But it's probably going to be flat.
Right, because you're in the 11th partial at that point, which is a third scale degree.
Well, you're in the 10th partial. Sorry to fact.
Yeah, you're right.
Fact check you.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, even for a seasoned veteran of the Overtone series, sometimes it's a little tricky to keep track of all these numbers. And I know you did know that you had the right answer. You showed your work, and there was something wrong that I had to get my red pen for.
There you go. I appreciate that.
But yeah, so we're playing on a flat partial if we play it with first valve, and as we talked about a little bit before, if you're playing a high note. Human tendency in general is probably that you're going to be a little bit flat. So if we're doing first valve, flat partial, we're flat, everything's flat, it's not going to really work out. What about if we're playing that note in first position or open? What's the intonation tendency of that?
Wait, what?
Of the open C, first position C.
Oh, first position open. That's going to be high, right?
Yeah.
It rides high. Yeah.
So, on trombone, we're kind of trained to just kick it out a little bit. You mean maybe demonstrate how much you're kicking out for that high C compared to the high B flat?
Baby skosh. So here, I'll start on the B flat. I just do like a little, it's almost more of a visual mindfulness reminder for me.
Yeah, and it's very slight. You could obviously lip it. you're going to be more
Right,
successful if that slide is in the right spot. But also keep in mind that's dependent on you, the horn, the mouthpiece, the
Right.
day. You know, there's a lot of kind of specific details in that may or may not be exactly what you want it to be in the moment. So in general, we talk about kicking that note out. But if you're flat, don't kick it out.
Yeah, don't kick it out. You'll be
That's
fine.
not going to help you. So in general, I think that's a really great note. And going back to Meistersinger on C tuba, that last little run is C, D, E. And on C tuba, but it's also problematic on B flat tuba, just with different notes, I play that D open because that's the same partial number 9 that we were just talking about. And if we're playing it on B flat tuba, playing C, D next to each other, then we're on 9, 10. So we might have some other issues involved. You know, it's always funny, especially with that excerpt, because that's kind of, you know, that's a staple excerpt that we all have to play. And the intonation tendencies are pretty predictable. And I feel like I watch all of my students go through the same thing. Just like, these notes are flat. It's like, yeah, they are flat. So, you know, all of this sort of stuff, we're not just talking about math for math's sake, just to like, how well do you know physics? Like, that's not really what we're doing here. A lot of this is really practical for knowing how to play these instruments, right? And knowing exactly what's gonna help us, how we're gonna like interact with these instruments, which I think is really important data. And I think you're less likely to miss notes if you put the slide in the right spot, or you have the best valve combination down and the target is exactly where you want it to be. What I find, if I don't have the right valves down, or I'm not precisely in the right position sometimes, it's like you're at the top of the target, then you have to get funneled in, which you could easily chip it and overshoot or undershoot it, but it's, you know, you have all these kind of concerns to deal with.
Right.
So we got up to 9. Number 10.
Number 10.
And we're getting up there.
And for those keeping score at home, this is the double of the fifth partial, which means that we're in the third scale degree of our harmonic series. And this is that naturally flat thing that we were talking about. Let's see how flat it is on my trombone. Probably pretty flat. I haven't checked it.
Yeah, and we're asking you to do a lot here by just playing. You can start wherever you need to.
I like to do like the slur up, because this is when I first learned about the harmonic series. It was always like going up and like feeling each one. So I should probably go back and do it. So it's not like remarkably, like they're not going to evict me from my house if they heard this with the windows down walking down the street, but it's like, it's noticeable. In a shortened setting, there's a lot, like most of the time, if you're ever called to play that note, it's probably in an improvised solo where you chose to, you made your own bed and you picked it for yourself. Right. And you can choose the harmonic context, and you can choose how long you sit on it. And you can get away with, you know, a little bit of petty lipping up that can get you in the safe zone. And so a lot of times when I play things that call for a high D, I've usually played a first position.
I have
and
too. I
gotten
can't
away with
totally
it.
argue that that's, you know, from this very mathematical perspective, there's an argument to be said that that's not right, or that's not the best choice. From a practical trombone player setting, I don't know how many people play it anywhere else.
I have some other context where you might play it somewhere else.
Okay. Well, go for it.
Very specific. I just think it's funny to talk about. For a high D, you could play it in like a very, very short third position in the event that you need to do slide vibrato, and you are playing slide vibrato where you're trying to replicate the style of a person that used slide vibrato that went above the pitch slightly. You know?
I mean, so again, that kind of outside of the scope of this discussion, but in general, I like to think about slide vibrato being a no-no in first position.
Right. Yeah.
And so if you're going to do slide vibrato on that high D, you don't want to be in like, first.
I like to do it where I'm going slightly up and slightly under the pitch.
Which is how it'll sound in tune.
Right.
Again, outside of the scope of this a little bit. But yeah, there are reasons to play that other places.
Yes.
definitely.
Specific instance of that is the end of Patrick Williams' arrangement of All the Way, the Sinatra tune. I think Bill Waters recorded it, and he does it. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I wasn't there, but and I don't think anyone recorded a video. But it sounds like a fourth position, or not fourth position, like a short change third position.
There are lots of places
at
to
the
play
end
it.
of the song. Right, you could play it in fourth. You can really get away with a lot of trouble once you're up this high.
Right.
But that tune, it doesn't quite sound right to do slide vibrato. I'll show you both ways. So there's you have all the room in the world to vibrato on that third position. I think I just heard my partner getting some sort of horrible flashbacks to me practicing that way too much. Sounds weird in first position. Let me show you.
Yeah, especially because
sound
it's already a little bit flat. And
now you're
yeah.
when you do that slide vibrato, you're hovering. The center of pitch that's implied is going to be the theoretical slide position in between how far you go out and how far you go in.
Right.
And so you were trying to sound like Bill Waters, but now you sound like the well-intentioned, spirited lady at your local church that's singing along in the hymn really, really loud with the wide vibrato, and there you have it. Which is an effect if you want to go for that. That's fine.
Right.
But
so I think we should probably table the overtone discussion. Hopefully that was helpful to some people who maybe never thought about it in that way, maybe haven't really considered all of it. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting little idea that's present no matter if we're thinking about it or not.
Good stuff.
But yeah, so I think, feel free to give us some feedback. I think we might do some sort of theoretical thing. I'm trying to come up with very specific categories of things that we can talk about that, I could also maybe have some sort of visual starter to each of these sections of like theory time or something, probably ideally a more clever name. But something along those sorts of lines, and just kind of having that sort of idea there, which I think that'll be helpful to think about different concepts that we could maybe be doing, and maybe we could have some sort of equipment section or something additionally, or just various little things. So I think we should try to get to some of these questions, and I'm sorry, I realized I did not set up the comments computer very well or at all. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. I guess I have to go back into there. Now we're back. All right. So let's see if we can get to some of these questions from Brian. So top 10 non-trombonists. So I feel like Brian's questions have kind of varied, but I kind of assume he's thinking from like a jazz background. Is that fair to say? You think that we should go that route?
We can go jazz background for this one.
So yeah, I mean that's a lot of different things that we could go, a lot of directions we could go. And then is this a part of it that we're doing? Who or what are your favorite musicians' albums that you think Fuse people should know? Or are these separate things? Maybe separate.
Sure,
So
we can do both.
Top 10 non-trombonists. So thinking from a jazz perspective, I'm just going to start out with Lee Morgan.
Ooh, great one. Yeah, I'm gonna try to think of just like there's like definitely like faces and sounds and ideas that flash in my head like right before I'm gonna play of like what do I hear? It's like what kind of like traditions and sounds am I drawing from, and what immediate things do I recognize in the people that I'm playing around me? And the first one that I usually am looking for in myself is probably Oscar Peterson. It's probably the first one that I think of like my non-trombonist like biggest inspiration. That would probably be
that's a great one. I'm gonna go. Probably should do a saxophone player. I mean, you gotta have John Coltrane in there.
Oh yeah,
I think that's pretty easy to throw that in there.
Definitely. I'll say another obvious one that I feel like I'd be rich if I didn't put in is Billy Strayhorn, as far as like
composition sort of angle,
composition sort of things, and informs jazz playing in so many ways.
Yeah. From there, I think I kind of want to go to another trumpet player. Not that, we can't list other people, but trumpet, it's the closest thing, to us jazz trombone land. And I'm going to go with Dizzy Gillespie.
Ooh, great one. I feel like, any jazz trombonist or any jazz brass musician that wants to command their instrument probably needs to spend some significant time listening to Dizzy Gillespie.
Yeah, definitely.
I know that I do, and I still don't understand half what he plays.
Yeah. Also, I probably should have done this earlier, but hello to Brady. Thanks for being back with us. Also, Zach.
Hey, Brady.
We haven't seen Zach in a while, so thanks for being here and making it back. I know we changed the day. That may have complicated things, but it's when we could do it. So sorry, and it might change in the future. So is it me or is it you? I can't.
I think it's me.
It's you.
I'm doing my third one. I'll do Joe Henderson. Playing and writing, just outstanding, and such a storied discography as well.
I'm gonna do one that I feel like, not because I know everything about what he's done, but because I should. And Cannonball Adderley.
Oh, great one.
It's definitely that's definitely one that I feel ashamed to not have done more research on outside of school. I mean, I've done some research and things, but not as much as I feel like I should have.
Definitely. In that same vein, I would say probably Benny Golson would be another good one as far as writing and playing and things that just have been formed. I hear Benny Golson thoughts they come from deep in my subconscious brain, when I'm trying to improvise and be cool. It's what's the coolest thing I can do right now? My brain will vomit out some sort of Benny Golson vocabulary or call this Benny Golson tune or things like that. Just great stuff.
Yeah, I feel like we've left out bass players completely.
We have. This is horrible.
And guitar,
we gotta fix it.
Right?
And guitar. All right, I'll do a bass guitar and a drum.
Okay. For bass, I'm gonna go kind of a different direction and kind of keep it with writing. But I mean, not that his bass playing isn't great, but I kind of in my head I hear his arrangements more. John Clayton.
Ooh, great one. Yeah. Absolutely.
So you want to go guitar?
Sure, I can go guitar. I'll say, as far as one of it probably listened to the longest would be Joe Pass, the one that's kind of instilled more
right. Especially with that JJ album.
The most time with. Yeah.
From our very small trombone circle.
But honorable mentions Jim Hall, Kurt Rosenwinkel. There's so many Kurt Rosenwinkel I don't think has had any particular collaborations with trombonists, but the intersection of guitar and trombone is significant.
Yeah, I think one really interesting thing about guitar and trombone is that their lowest note before pedal tones on trombone is the same, and assuming a standard transposition standard tuning of guitar is that low E. This one. That being the guitar is a transposing by an octave, so they often write it differently.
Right.
But that E, so it's most guitar lines kind of work on trombone, although it gets kind of high because it's easy for them to do that. It's a little harder for us to pop out some of those notes. So who's our drummer that we should go with for this list?
Do you want to go?
You got it. It seems like you have something on your mind.
I would say one I've listened to longest, Ed Thigpen. One that inspires me the most right now, Matt Wilson.
Very good. Zach says that he's been busy with orchestra, Allstate, preparing for some auditions and finals. So stressful. Yeah, it's definitely more than a few things to kind of deal with. But hopefully all those are going well. Good luck on auditions. Maybe that's college auditions. Is that what we're talking about? Either way, whatever the auditions may be, good luck. And so I think maybe a new segment, since we have some newfangled technology, and we didn't really mention this, but we have a slightly more direct path of audio between the two of us as of right now.
Yes.
So I think that we might test this out just a little bit, and let's just do a little kind of chordal sort of thing. We'll just kind of make it rubato, and I'll give you the cheat sheet, Connor, so you can see what I'm playing, just in case you can't hear it well enough.
So what are we doing? You're gonna play like a chord, and then I'm gonna improvise over the sound of the chord.
Yeah, and I think we'll keep it slow. Maybe
right,
you end on a note, and I'll move somewhere. And I'll admit I'm not a professional pianist. I guess that's technically incorrect. I did get paid to play piano, like maybe 9 months to a year ago. So maybe I am.
You're my favorite piano player.
You go.
I take back what I said about Oscar Peterson.
Yeah. All right. So let's do.
Partial series.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I didn't know a good way to signal any sort of.
That was a very appropriate way to end that.
Yeah, I didn't know what you would do with that information, but I think you chose the correct thing. That was a dealer's choice. You could go a lot of different directions.
Right, whatever you want. I figured lesson of the day, might as well do it.
Yeah, so maybe we'll call it there, and in the future, maybe that'll be the way we end things. Maybe
sure.
Maybe an idea.
Yeah, I like that.
Got the vibes in the studio. Yeah, I got some synthy patches going on.
Cooking up a stew.
So not that I'm the world's greatest pianist, but I do like this sort of setting where I have all this time to think. And only a couple of times did I take too long to think.
That was cool. I really enjoyed that.
So Zach says, I admit I'm not too well versed in jazz, but it must take some great ears to do such complicated improv. That was clean. Yeah, I think it's really important to demystify that sort of idea. We had for the UNT Tuba Studio today, we had a guest who's Ken Eshelman, who's an amazing tuba player in his own right. an amazing jazz pianist and also an amazing both at the same time. He played some Isn't She Lovely, with playing piano with his left hand and playing tuba with his right hand, which is pretty fun to watch. But I think, I think what's important to think about with this, because it's easy to say that was really complicated. How could one do that? I can't do that. And not to take away from Connor being able to play whatever over top of what I played, but, one is capable of working on this skill. You probably weren't great at doing that 10 years ago, if I had to guess.
No, not at all. And I don't think that I would have had as many tools in the toolbox just because I hadn't tried as many times by then, or just gone through the motions of, every slowly but surely getting myself acclimated with certain sounds that I hear from like a chord standpoint, and then associating that with vocabulary that I can play on the trombone that I hear based off of that. But it's just something you mess around with. And it started, when I was like 18 or so, and I would play in a rock band. They were like, hey, we're going in A minor. Let's do it. And I was like, okay, I know that scale. And then that was easy. And we would play an entire set where we just played in one key for a long time. You know what I mean? And like, I got really comfortable with A Dorian. I would mix around with A blues scale. I tried out my A minor pentatonics. I tried my C major pentatonic. I tried my E minor pentatonic. And, figured out things like that. And slowly but surely, from like having multiple like weird jam band moments, and then also like practicing bebop and other things that like do the same thing, like chord goes with, vocabulary. You just develop a repertoire of vocabulary.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to end the show with that sort of data. But long story short is anybody can learn how to do this. And you're going to probably not sound great first try, and that's okay.
That's right.
Most of us, I know I didn't. Again, Connor just said he didn't. Most people didn't. There are a select few who it seems like they have.
Right.
But there are, mere mortals who figure this out. So on that note, we'll call the show there, and thanks everyone for watching. And we will see you next week, right? Next week is good?
Next week's good.
Cool. Next week, we will see you then. All right.
All right. Bye, everybody.